Once upon a time, in the land of Judah, there was a young man named Daniel. Daniel was a noble and wise young man who loved God with all his heart. He was known for his integrity, faithfulness, and wisdom. But his life was about to change dramatically because of the great empire of Babylon, which had conquered Judah and taken many of its people captive. The story of Daniel is one of faith, courage, divine wisdom, and hope, a story that continues to inspire believers today. It all began during the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim of Judah, when the Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar, came to Jerusalem with his armies. The city was besieged and eventually fallen. As part of their conquest, Nebuchadnezzar took the best and brightest of Judah, young men who were strong, handsome, and wise, and brought them into his palace in Babylon. Among these were Daniel and his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The king's purpose was to train these young men to serve in his court, to be wise advisors and administrators. The king commanded that they be given new names to reflect Babylonian gods and culture. Daniel was called Belteshazzar, Hananiah became Shadrach, Mishael was renamed Meshach, and Azariah was called Abednego. But Daniel made a firm decision in his heart: he would not defile himself with the king's rich food and wine, which went against the laws of his God. He asked the chief official for permission to eat vegetables and drink water instead. God caused the official to show favor to Daniel, but he was still worried about what the king would think if they looked weaker than the others. So Daniel proposed a test, a 10-day trial where he and his friends would only eat vegetables and drink water. At the end of the 10 days, their appearance was healthier and more robust than the other young men who ate the royal food. Impressed by their health, the official allowed them to continue their diet. God blessed Daniel and his friends with knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Daniel, in particular, was given insight into visions and dreams. When the time came for the young men to stand before Nebuchadnezzar, he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They were 10 times better than all the magicians, enchanters, and wise men in Babylon. Daniel remained in service through the reign of Cyrus, the Persian king. One night, King Nebuchadnezzar had a disturbing dream that troubled his spirit. He called his wise men to interpret it, promising great rewards if they could tell him the meaning. But the wise men refused because they knew they couldn't interpret dreams unless the spirit of the gods revealed it to them. The king threatened to kill all the wise men if they failed. When Daniel heard about this, he prayed and sought God's mercy. That night, God revealed the dream and its meaning to Daniel in a vision. Daniel praised God, acknowledging that wisdom and power belonged to him. He then went to King Nebuchadnezzar and explained that the dream was about a great statue made of various materials: a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet of iron mixed with clay. A stone, not cut by human hands, struck the statue's feet and shattered it. The stone then grew into a mountain filling the whole earth. Daniel explained that each part of the statue represented a kingdom: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. The stone represented God's everlasting kingdom, which would destroy all earthly kingdoms and stand forever. Nebuchadnezzar was overwhelmed and recognized that Daniel's God was the true God, the God above all gods, the Lord over kings and rulers. The king honored Daniel and made him a high official, placing him over the entire province of Babylon and appointing his friends to important positions. But Nebuchadnezzar's pride grew. He built a huge golden statue, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura. He summoned all the officials, governors, judges, and rulers of the land for its dedication. A herald proclaimed that everyone must bow down and worship the golden image whenever they heard the sound of musical instruments. Anyone who refused would be thrown into a blazing furnace. When the music sounded, all the people fell down and worshipped the statue, except for 3 young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They refused to worship any god but the true God of Israel. The officials reported this to King Nebuchadnezzar, who was furious. He called them before him and asked, "Is it true? You refuse to serve my gods or worship the golden image I have set up." He gave them another chance to obey. When the music played again, he warned them that if they still refused, they would be thrown into the fiery furnace. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied calmly, "O king, we do not need to defend ourselves. Our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from your furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand. But even if he does not, we will not worship your gods or bow to your image." Nebuchadnezzar's rage burned hotter. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual and commanded his strongest soldiers to bind the 3 men and throw them into the fire. The flames were so fierce that the soldiers who threw them in were burned alive. But suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar looked into the furnace and saw 4 men walking around unharmed. The 4th looked like a divine being. He called out, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out." The 3 young men stepped out of the fire, completely unharmed. Their clothes were not even singed, and there was no smell of fire on them. Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and praised their God, declaring that no other God could save in this way. He promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and decreed that anyone speaking against their God would be punished. Later, Nebuchadnezzar had another dream that disturbed him deeply. He dreamed of a giant tree that reached the heavens, providing food and shelter for all creatures. A holy watcher, an angelic messenger, commanded that the tree be cut down, its branches stripped, and its leaves scattered. But the stump was to be left in the ground, bound with iron and bronze, and drenched with dew. The message was that Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom would be taken from him, and he would live like an animal, eating grass and being soaked by the dew, for 7 years, until he acknowledged that the Most High rules over all kingdoms of men. Daniel, known for his wisdom, explained the dream to Nebuchadnezzar. He told the king that the tree represented his greatness. The decree meant that Nebuchadnezzar would be humbled and driven from human society, living among the animals until he humbled himself and recognized that God alone is the ruler of all. Sure enough, about 12 months later, Nebuchadnezzar was walking in his palace, boasting, "Is not this great Babylon I have built?" Immediately, a voice from heaven declared, "Your kingdom is taken from you." The king was driven from his throne and made to live like an animal, eating grass, with his hair and nails growing long. But after 7 years, when he looked up to heaven and acknowledged God's sovereignty, his sanity and kingship were restored. Nebuchadnezzar praised the Most High, declaring his everlasting kingdom and his rule over all nations. Not long after, Nebuchadnezzar's successor, Belshazzar, held a grand feast with 1,000 nobles. During the celebration, he ordered the sacred vessels taken from the temple in Jerusalem to be used for drinking wine. As they praised their gods of gold, silver, bronze, and stone, suddenly fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the wall, "Min, Tekel, Parsin." The king was terrified, and no wise man could interpret the writing. The queen advised him to seek Daniel's help, for Daniel had previously revealed divine mysteries. Daniel was summoned and told the king that the writing meant that God had numbered his days, weighed him in the balances, and found him lacking. His kingdom was divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night, Belshazzar was slain, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom. Under Darius, Daniel was appointed to a high position because of his exceptional wisdom. But jealous officials plotted against him. They persuaded King Darius to sign a decree that anyone who prayed to any god or man besides the king for 30 days would be thrown into the lion's den. Daniel, faithful to his God, continued praying 3 times a day, facing Jerusalem. His enemies caught him in the act and reported it to the king. Although distressed, Darius was forced by the law to throw Daniel into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was placed over the den's opening, and the king sealed it with his signet ring to prevent interference. That night, Darius fasted and could not sleep. At dawn, Darius hurried to the den and called out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God been able to rescue you?" Daniel replied, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me because I was found innocent before him." The king was overjoyed and ordered Daniel to be lifted out of the den. The officials who had accused Daniel were then thrown into the lions' den, and the lions devoured them. Darius then issued a decree praising the God of Daniel, acknowledging that he is the living God who rescues and delivers. But the visions of Daniel did not end there. God continued to reveal future events through visions and dreams. Daniel saw 4 beasts rising from the sea, each more terrifying than the last, symbolizing successive kingdoms that would rise and fall: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. These kingdoms would be powerful and fierce, but ultimately, God's kingdom would come and endure forever. He saw the Ancient of Days seated on a throne of fiery flames, judging the nations, and a figure called the Son of Man approaching him. The Son of Man was given authority, glory, and an everlasting kingdom, which all nations and peoples would serve. This vision foretold the coming of a messianic figure, Jesus Christ, who would establish an eternal kingdom. Later, Daniel received a vision of a ram with 2 horns, representing the Medo-Persian Empire, and a male goat with a prominent horn, symbolizing Greece. The goat's horn was broken, and 4 smaller horns grew in its place, representing the division of Alexander the Great's empire among his generals. Out of one of these emerged a fierce king who would oppose God's people and oppose the Holy Covenant, doing terrible things in the last days. Daniel also saw a detailed vision of future wars between the kings of the north and south, involving alliances, betrayals, and conflicts that would lead to great suffering for God's people. He saw a prince of fierce countenance, a ruler who would exalt himself above all gods, speak against the Most High, and oppress the saints for a time, times, and half a time at an era of great tribulation. Throughout these visions, Daniel was deeply troubled, but angels explained that these prophecies revealed God's plans for the end of days. They assured him that God's kingdom would ultimately triumph, and his justice would prevail. Daniel was told to seal up many of these visions, for they concern times yet to come. Despite the complexity of these visions, their message is clear: God is sovereign over all history. The kingdoms of men rise and fall, but God's eternal kingdom will never be destroyed. His justice and righteousness will ultimately reign, and his messianic king, Jesus Christ, will establish everlasting peace. Daniel's life exemplifies unwavering faith, obedience, and divine wisdom. His story encourages us to trust in God's sovereignty, to remain faithful in the face of persecution, and to seek divine insight through prayer and humility. No matter how dark the world may become, God's kingdom will shine forever. As you reflect on Daniel's journey, from captivity to influence, from visions of destruction to promises of hope, remember that God's plans are perfect, and his promises are true. Always stand firm in your faith, for the Lord is in control. His justice will come, his kingdom will endure, and his love will prevail. If you found this story inspiring, please like, comment your thoughts below, subscribe to our channel for more stories from the Word of God, and share this message with family and friends. Let us encourage one another with the remarkable faith of Daniel and the hope of God's everlasting kingdom. May God's strength and wisdom be with you always.